While Ross was still annoyed after firing his secretary, Ruth immediately ran as soon as she got out of the taxi she was riding in. Every now and then, she would look at her watch and make sure everything was running smoothly. She was worried that she would be late.
Hopefully I arrive on time and don't make a mistake this time,
Ruth muttered anxiously. Her eyes looked around to look for the client she had to pick up when she arrived at the international arrivals area.
Why did Mr. Zane say such unclear and general characteristics? He said that the one I should pick up was a handsome man in a navy suit, and he was the CEO of Earlcore. I'm gonna go crazy after a while.
Ruth grumbled while shaking her hands. Her breathing sounded labored due to exhaustion from running. It was not without reason that Ruth felt annoyed. She acted like that because in the airport pickup hall there were lots of handsome men wearing navy suits. Of course, she became very confused. While Ruth was focusing on her fatigue and looking down, suddenly Ross walked past her. They both passed each other but didn't notice each other. Ross also looked annoyed because the person who picked him up never arrived, even though he was quite sure that he had been waiting a long time. He even fired one of his secretaries in between.
Why is James taking so long? Does he want me to fire him too?
Ross growled as he took a rough breath.
Besides, where is the envoy from Brown Corp? Are they unprofessional to make me wait like this?
Scolded Ross. From a distance, you can see a man wearing a milk chocolate jacket running while panting. His hair was even messy. Maybe he was hit by strong winds on the way. He looked here and there, looking for someone.
I hope Mr. Ross isn't angry.
Apparently, the man who looked panicked was James. He is one of Ross's secretaries at Earl Corps. This morning he was on duty to pick up his boss, but he was late.
That's it, Mr. Ross.
James exclaimed. His face brightened when he saw Ross standing not far from him. Suddenly, James ran fast towards Ross. In his brain, he was already thinking of several things that he would use as excuses so that his boss wouldn't be angry with him.
Good morning, sir.
Said James while grinning.
No need to smile like that. You make me tickle.
Ross snapped.
Sorry for my delay, sir. Traffic was so heavy this morning that I was stuck in traffic.
You should get out before sunrise so you don't get stuck in traffic.
Ross replied sarcastically. The expression on his face looked serious and scary, making James shiver. James felt the need to change the subject. He saw that Ross was alone, even though it was clear that his boss had come home with someone.
Why are you alone, sir? Is Chris out to buy something?
I fired him.
James asked curiously. Ross answered flatly. Hearing Ross's answer, James didn't dare ask anymore. However, his boss actually asked him to talk again.
Have you met the envoy from Brown Corp? Until now, they haven't shown their nose.
Asked Ross, who was starting to feel that the Brown Corp envoy was not on time.
I haven't met them yet, sir. It could be that they have arrived but is confused about looking for us.
Their conversation about the Brown Corps people was overheard by Ruth, who happened to be nearby. Without thinking much, Ruth immediately approached the two men. At that moment, he saw Ross, and his eyes widened. However, he was disturbed by James, who was standing next to Ross because the man's appearance was disheveled. Ruth immediately came over and straightened James' shirt collar. Of course, his attitude surprised James very much.
You can't look messy. Next time, you have to take better care of your appearance,
Said Ruth. After fixing James' shirt collar, Ruth immediately rushed to stand in front of Ross. She smiled, then extended her hand towards the man.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Ross Shannon. My introduction is Ruth Garcia, Secretary of Brown Corps.
Next, Ruth confidently introduced herself to Ross. Ross's forehead furrowed when he saw Ruth so brave. He quite appreciated the woman's courage and welcomed her outstretched hand. Moreover, Ruth seemed to save him from feeling uncomfortable when he saw James' messy appearance.
I'm Ross Shannon. Nice to meet you too, miss.
Ross said, making James gape at him. This was the first time in James' time working at Earl Corps that Ross Shannon wanted to return a handshake from a stranger he had never met. Ruth's face suddenly brightened. She felt relieved because Ross, who was known to be quite a perfectionist, was willing to accept her helping hand even though she saw a slightly annoyed expression on the man's face. But it doesn't matter. She can ignore it and pretend she doesn't know so that her business runs smoothly.
Thank you, sir. I am very grateful that you were able to arrive safely in Los Angeles.
Ruth, who was able to control the situation, immediately spoke in professional secretary mode.
Chairman Brown has prepared a dinner to welcome your arrival. We at Brown Corp really hope that you can fulfill our invitation.
Explained Ruth, who wanted to win over Ross Shannon, CEO of Octi, in front of her. After trying to persuade Ross, Ruth finally succeeded. The man accepted the invitation to dinner without hesitation. This, of course, made Ruth very relieved. Ross even offered to ride in the car together. It was not in vain that Ruth read several articles about Octi disorders while traveling,
Miss, please sit with Mr. Ross in the back seat.
said James as he opened a door for Ruth.
Are you sure? Is your boss okay?
Asked Ruth in a whisper. She then glanced at Ross, who was sitting firmly in the back seat of the car.
I'm sure there won't be any problems.
Answered James. After confirming, Ruth went up. She was quite nervous because she had to sit next to Ross. There was no conversation between them along the way. The atmosphere in the car felt very quiet. However, Ross suddenly experienced hypoglycemia. The man was sweating profusely and almost losing consciousness.
Try eating this pineapple candy, sir. Maybe this will help you a little.
Offered Ruth as she handed several packets of candy to Ross.
Thanks.
Ross replied. He took the candy that Ruth gave him and ate it. Ruth, who was quick to respond, immediately set the AC to the right number. She did this so that Ross could feel more comfortable. At night, as previously promised, Ross came to the dinner party. Zane Brown was very happy to be able to meet Ross in this happy situation.
Thank you for accepting the invitation to the dinner at Brown Corp. This dinner is specifically to welcome your arrival. You must have heard about it from Ruth this morning.
Explained Zane at length.
Yes, I did hear that from your secretary. She's so good with words that I couldn't refuse.
Replied Ross, praising Ruth's work.
Ruth is a very talented woman.
Responded Zane.
Shall we now toast the presence of Mr. Ross Shannon?
He added while raising a glass filled with wine. Everyone at the dinner agreed with Zane's words and raised their wine glasses in unison. However, the main character at this dinner event just remained silent, making everyone confused.
I can't drink alcohol. Please drink yourselves without...
Said Ross firmly. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward because of Ross' refusal. Everyone looked at each other and one by one they lowered their glasses. Coinciding with that situation, Ruth came in with medicine in her hand. Now everyone's attention was focused on her,
I'm sorry it took me a while, because I took Mr. Ross medicine.
said Ruth, showing medicine she was carrying.
Mr. Ross can't drink alcohol because the doctor forbade him. Of course you understand that you can't drink alcohol when you're taking medication.
She explained again. She did that to help ease the atmosphere, which had become awkward. Ross was quite impressed with Ruth. For some reason, he felt that the woman understood him well enough, and that made a huge impression on Ruth.